evening and good day, and welcome back to Module 6 of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the Workplace Certificate. I hope everybody is doing good, and we have a great program for you today. Now we've been getting a lot of questions about quizzes. People want to pass these quizzes and want to graduate. So let me address these questions if you don't mind. Yes, you can access all quizzes via academiacentral.org. And also, all quizzes are due May 19, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, all quizzes. Please make sure you must earn a 70% or better on each quiz. So you have to pass each quiz at 70% or better so that you can obtain the certificate and the badge. Yes, all 7 quizzes, please. We have also received a number of inquiries about future sessions for this program. Will we offer it again? Will there be others? I can assure you, we are, as we speak, thinking exactly what is next and trying to digest your wonderful feedback. No decisions have been made, but our commitment to you, we have your email, and you will be the first to know if we have future programs similar or different from this one after this certificate. Also, many of you asked us different questions about the MUMA master's program, MBA program, PhD, DBA, and other graduate certificate. This is why we decided to hold a virtual information sessions on May 12th, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And you see there the web link for you to learn more about the program. And you're all invited to this wonderful virtual information sessions. All right. As we promise you every week, we will retain and will present to you some of the great gems, great quotes from last week, quotes that resonated very well with many of the 135,000 of our participants, and we saw it mentioned on social media. So let me go through some of them that also I really like. I love the first one. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. My advice to you, go together. Don't go fast. Also, lead with data, follow with passion. It's okay to have passion, but make sure you're using the facts. Of course, people analytics, as a wonderful Dr. Triparna Divridi told us last time, people analytics starts with the question. But also, please be transparent with the question you're trying to answer with the data and what the data you are using. And let me share with you another secret we have at the MUMA kind of business. What we say is be careful, because if you torture the data long enough, it will confess to anything you want it to. So be careful about that. Also, create a culture of courageous conversations. Just the whole purpose of this certificate is to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. So let's work on that amazing culture of courageous conversations. Last but not least is the micro steps that can lead to the big changes. Now, let's go back to our certificate, that wonderful journey. Yes, we are in module 6. So only one more going. I know, it's like everybody, oh no, yes, but the good news is we have an incredible module for you today. It's about the community outreach. How do you work with your stakeholders, your partners, your suppliers, other community leaders, so that you all make the community better, but also you help your own DEI effort in your own organization. Great, great concept. But before that, we have an amazing opening segment where our good friend, longtime friend, Steve Griggs, the Tampa Bay Lightning CEO, is going to talk with our visionary mayor, the city of Tampa mayor, Jane Castor, about how important it is to have a diverse community, not just for the quality of life of everyone in the community, but also to attract and retain businesses in a city or in a community. Let me tell you a little bit about our wonderful mayor. I think we have one of the best mayors. Mayor Castor is Tampa's very first ever openly gay mayor and only the 37th open gay mayor in the country. She is a true visionary. She really cares a lot about her city. She cares about the citizen, but also she is so committed to make our city a city where no one is left behind, a city where people are treated with justice, equity, and inclusiveness, regardless of who they are. And actually, as you can see here, even in her swearing ceremony on May 1st, 2019, she emphasized the importance of diversity, equality, and opportunity for all. Her dream is to have a city where no one is left behind. After that, we have, yes, another great panel. It's like, how can things could get even better? Yes, they get better, and we really have an amazing panel that will discuss how to make sure that your corporate social responsibility activities align very well with your DEI effort and initiative, so that, again, you move along through that wonderful journey. So then comes the instructional segment, and back to popular demand, our wonderful Dr. Doreen Macaulay. Also, Dr. Janelle Wells will also be with us today. And also Dr. Corey Posey, who will, the three of them will talk to us about the community outreach, as I just mentioned, and the importance of working with stakeholders, with community leaders for the good of the community and the good of the organizations too. I think we're going to have an incredible Module 6. Welcome back. And I cannot wait to see you next week. Remember, next week we're going to do the graduation, so be ready. But for now, let's go to Module 6. And my good friend Steve Griggs, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Moaz. We appreciate it. And welcome to Module 6. My name is Steve Griggs, and I'm the CEO of the Tampa Bay Lightning. I want to thank USF MUMA College of Business. And obviously, this is the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Certificate. And I want to thank all of our friends at Jabil for helping us with this. Dr. Moaz, again, thank you for everything. And to Elizabeth Frazier on my team, who's done an incredible job in putting all of these modules together. We've got done Module 1 through 5 so far. There's 140,000 participants that are involved in this program from 39 different countries. So I can't thank you enough for all being a part of this. And, you know, with Module 1 through 5, we've been on quite the journey. You know, the journey not only for yourself, but for your family and also for your businesses. And we've gone everything through organizational structure and recruiting. And now we get into community outreach, and we talk about DEI, not only inside our organization, but outside our organization, and how it's going to affect our workforce and affect our community. And I think it's really important as we move forward here that, you know, every single organization builds a strat plan that needs to be focused on DEI inside and outside the organization. And our organization here at the Tampa Bay Lightning, we've been fortunate. We've worked for Jeff Vinnick for the last 10 years, and CSR has been a big part of our organization because we're a forward-facing organization. We have an incredible fan base here. But as of May 29th, we started our DEI roadmap and have really committed not only internally but externally to the DEI outreach. And every business needs to have this type of model, and we'll build better companies, we'll build better communities. And speaking of community, I have the great pleasure of interviewing today Mayor Jane Castor from the great city of Tampa Bay. She is the 59th mayor of Tampa. She was the first female chief here in Tampa, and she spent 31 years with the Tampa Bay Police Department. She is also a great friend, a great fan of the organization. We've had the great pleasure of raising the Stanley Cup together. And, we have an incredible city here in Tampa, and it's a diverse city. It's a great city. And I'm just so glad that we could have you here today and have a conversation and really talk about, why diversity, equity, and inclusion is so important, not only to the businesses here in this city, but then the whole city as a community in general, in order for us to attract great businesses and retain great businesses. And welcome. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you, Steve. It's always wonderful to be with you. And as you know, I always say I love to hear you say organization. But the Bolts, it was wonderful to raise that Stanley Cup, and it's going to be just as joyous to be able to raise it again. So very exciting to have the Lightning, Tampa Bay Lightning, as one of our sports franchises, and probably the best ownership and best run sports franchise in the entire world, definitely in the United States. So it's great to be here with you, my friend.
Well, thank you. As Moaz likes to say, it's always about a win-win-win partnership. So our partnership with the city is win-win-win. And, let's dive into a couple questions here and talk about this great city and the benefits that we see with the diverse workplace and community. It creates a great quality of life. But how do we attract and retain businesses in the Tampa Bay area that want to be about diversity and inclusion?
Well, it is critically important, and it goes back to my days at the police department, and the diversity, equity, inclusion was critically important at the police department. That organization mirrored the community that they served, and now that same theory and position has come with me to the mayor's office. And our city is identified by our diversity and the way that we embrace that diversity. And so we have to ensure that not only are we maintaining, but building upon that day by day. All of the groups that I talk to, businesses through the EDC, through the chamber, they all look at Tampa based on our quality of life, based on our diversity, based on the opportunities that they find here in this wonderful city. So it's critically important that we pay attention to the DEI as we move forward and as we continue to grow as a city. And that really is the focus of my administration. It's the reason that I ran for this position as mayor, born and raised in Tampa and 61 years old. And this city's going to change more in the next 10 years than it has in my entire lifetime. So we have this once in a lifetime opportunity to create the city that we all want to live, work, and play in. And it is critically important that we stay laser focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion while we create that city we're going to pass off to the next generation.
We here at the Lightning, we're a hockey team, and we have about 200 employees. And so for us, we've been working at it for 10 years, but it's all about the strategy to attract diverse employees here, because it has to reflect our fan base and it has to reflect our community. So really, that's been a big focus of ours. But I think great companies attract great diverse people, and that's what we're really working hard on. When we talk to a lot of the variety of stakeholders here in the community, and we talk about their DEI efforts, talk about some of the businesses and the private entities and nonprofits, and I think about the great people over at Met Ministries and Feeding Tampa Bay and Jable and USF and Florida Blue. They're just great companies that have really leaned in this community.
Yes, without a doubt. And another reason that Tampa is the greatest city in the nation is that everyone, when we like to celebrate. I tell people that if you give us 2 weeks notice, we'll have a parade in your honor. And then look at, during this time of pandemic, so much negativity and struggle during the past year. but we had so much to be proud of, not just in, you know, our sports wins with the Stanley Cup and the Super Bowl and almost the World Series, but we also had celebrations in that when we struggle, we all come together as well. And there wasn't one company that I reached out to, including the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Buccaneers, and the Rays, that didn't assist financially in providing relief for our community. So it is critically important that all of the organizations within the city of Tampa and frankly in the Tampa Bay area understand their responsibility when it comes to their civic duty. And that is an aspect that we discuss over and over. One of the things that, a couple of the things that companies look for when they move here, and I would offer that the larger organizations and even a lot of the smaller businesses move their companies, their organizations here to the city of Tampa and to the Tampa Bay area based on not only the quality of life, but that diversity, the educational opportunities, the workforce availability, that there is the skilled talent out there. But they also move here so that, you know, all of their team members can have that experience of living in a very diverse community that, you know, is embracing and celebrating that diversity each and every day. So you named a couple of the companies, and we could go on and on and on for hours talking about the great companies that are here in the Tampa Bay area. And one of the things that people talk about, you know, attracting those organizations and companies to the city of Tampa. And I do that, I know you do that on a regular basis, play the part of the cheerleader, but really the companies that will do the attracting for us are the companies that have moved here and realize what a great community it is. And I know that the Lightning organization has been involved in that the entire time I've been the mayor. So very exciting time in our community.
You know, for the last 5 or 6 weeks, we've really discussed through the certificate program, diversity, equity, and inclusion with the Black community, the Asian community, the Hispanic community. But there is other diversities out there that we need to discuss, which is the LGBT, neurodiversity, gender, age, disabilities. All those voices need to be heard. They're all important. Tell me about some of the best practices as a city that we've been able to do to get those voices to be heard and to get those different backgrounds, because they're so important to our entire community.
Yes, and that is, I couldn't underscore the significance and importance of that any more than you just did. And one of the things we have to start with is looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion within each of our organizations. And as the city of Tampa, I always say this as a chief of police, had the same philosophy that I brought into the mayor's office. And that is, we are all a sum total of our life experiences. And we have to have those experiences around the table, especially when decisions are being made that will affect our entire community. And so with that thought in mind, we have at the city of Tampa, we have 4 administrators, and 3 of the administrators are women and a woman of color. And we have paid attention to our entire community, as you have stated, very diverse. And we have to not only listen, we have to listen to hear those life experiences and to also hear what the needs are, because you have those assumptions. I'll give you an example from the police department. We changed the way we police back in 2003. As police officers, we thought what the community needed was to be protected from rapists, robbers, and murderers, which is true, but very few people are victims of those types of crimes. So when we sat down and we really listened to the community, what they wanted was not to be a victim of theft, to have their cars broken into, stolen, or their homes. So we changed our philosophy, pivoted our business model, and as a result, reduced crime by over 80%. That's what we're looking at now with the administration here in the city of Tampa, is ensuring everyone's voice is heard. And you have to do that in a variety of ways. There's not just one size fits all. For example, I can't build my staff in a very diverse fashion and inclusive and equitable way and say, okay, check that box, I'm done. I have to make sure that we're reaching out to the entire community, to every corner, every neighborhood, to make sure everyone's voices are heard and everyone feels included. That is critically important, that people feel they are part of the community and their voice matters. And that position stays true in an organization, and it stays true all the way down to the neighborhoods and the individual residents within our community.
And when I look at the EDC, I look at the Tampa Bay Partnership, I look at the Chamber, as business advocates, the pillars of each one of them is really inclusion. You know, they're attracting business, but inclusion, not only attracting, but every single company that is already here, is they keep pushing onto those members how important it is that inclusion and those voices are heard. And you know, Bob Rorlach and Craig Richards and do an incredible job of making sure that's an important piece of this community, not only internally but externally as well. So when you think externally and you talk about benchmarking, comparing us to other metropolitan areas, and we're out there recruiting, what are those companies looking for from a DEI realm perspective, and what's really important when they think about Tampa Bay?
Well, one of the things that those companies are looking for, and we have had working with the organizations that you just mentioned, the Chamber, the Partnership, and the EDC, you know, we have put a great deal of thought and effort into this one area here. What are those organizations? What are the needs? What are they looking for when they're scouting a new location? And first and foremost is they want the community to be safe. And so we have done one of the safest cities in the nation for our size. They also are looking at those issues that our administration is focusing on. The workforce. Do you have the skilled workforce for the jobs that they're bringing into your community? And this is where our educational systems are critically important, with USF, University of Tampa, St. Leo, HCC, making sure that we are providing that skilled workforce for the future. And we're doing a good job with that. That's one of the areas of focus in the city of Tampa, workforce development. I hired a director for that position. We've never had one before. And then we are working on all levels, from the skilled trades all the way up to medical, financial, technology, looking at all of those areas that we can provide that skilled workforce. Next is housing affordability, making sure that anyone who comes to our city will be able to live in the neighborhood that they choose. And that's critically important for our residents currently as well, is that we cannot have families priced out of particular neighborhoods. That's one of the lessons that I learned on one of our chamber trips, benchmarking trips to Austin, is that Austin has a very low minority population, around 7% African American. As I said before, our city is defined by our diversity and the celebration of that. So the last thing that we can afford to do is to have families and individuals pushed out of the city because of rising home prices. So we are laser focused on that particular area as well. And then transportation. Transportation is a difficult one. Nothing moves quickly in transportation. And I always say that in the South, when people talk about mass transit, what they really mean is I want everybody else off the road so I can drive my SUV, by myself down the highway. But we are working on the transportation issues as well. But mostly it is safety, it's education, it's workforce availability, and then our housing options. And we're laser focused on all of those areas.
Well, thank you, Mayor. As we go through this journey of DEI, it's an individual journey. Companies are going through this journey, and cities are going through this journey. And as I like to say, is my wife always says, if you know better, you do better. And I think we continue to want to do better. So to everyone today, I hope you enjoy the module on community outreach. I think it's just an incredible program, and I thank everybody at USF for pulling this together. You have the ability to build your strat plan now, inside and out, for your organization. So, Mayor, I thank you. I can say you're the mayor of Tampa Bay.
There you go.
I want to thank everyone. Enjoy tonight's module.
Thank you. Come to Tampa. It's the best.
Thank you so much, Mayor Castor and Mr. Griggs, for such a great discussion. Hello, everyone. I'm Braulio Colon. And as we have seen in our previous modules, increasing diversity and creating a business model that embraces equity and inclusion is multifaceted, and it requires a comprehensive approach. We've discussed the importance of all of us undergoing a process of self-discovery and awareness, and we've gained insight on how companies can examine and confidently lean into their own DEI journey. It's on this journey that we'll discover DEI should not just be an internal company initiative, but it should also include an intentional focus on external community engagement and outreach. And that outreach should be designed to partner with community to address societal equity gaps and to make meaningful impact. These outreach efforts and programs should be informed by company stakeholders. And when we think of stakeholders, we should acknowledge that a company's primary stakeholders expand beyond investors and include employees that serve the company and the community members that surround it. In today's climate, the demand is very high for corporate external engagement, service, and action, particularly through a DEI lens. Much of the source of that demand are our very own employees, who view employment as a pursuit tied to more than a paycheck. Another source are consumers, who view that their purchasing decisions are decisions that are connected to their individual mission and values. And finally, another key source for that demand for action are community leaders and influencers who carry the legacy building, broader community vision and goals. Today, we're going to have a deliberate discussion about how businesses are supporting diversity and inclusion in their community. We'll explore how companies are thinking about the alignment of DEI initiatives with their CSR goals and employer branding. We'll discuss the importance of co-designing DEI strategies so that they are in alignment with both company and broader stakeholder values. We'll look at partnership development and the role community organizations play in delivering the community impact outcomes that ultimately determine success. And finally, we'll discuss the importance of corporate board membership and employee volunteerism in helping to drive our DEI community outreach, vision, direction, and outcomes. We are so fortunate to be joined today by two locally based companies here in Tampa, Jabil and Bloomin' Brands, as well as their partner nonprofit community organizations, Feeding Tampa Bay and the Urban League of Hillsborough County. I think you're going to find that the makeup of this panel will help observe real life examples of what's worked and also what we've learned that can provide areas of opportunity for improvement in how we approach and execute on community partnerships through DEI. I'm so excited to introduce our panel today. And by the way, you can find their full bios on the USF DEI website. Joining us, starting with Shalina Henry, who's Group Vice President at Bloomin' Brands. Stanley Gray, Interim Director for the Urban League of Hillsborough County, Bruce Johnson, Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer at Jabil, and Thomas Metz, President and CEO for Feeding Tampa Bay. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for taking the time to be a part of our discussion today. I first want to start off with just acknowledging, I mean, we are recording tonight's discussion the day the verdict was rendered in the Derek Chauvin case. And obviously, there is a lot of emotions tied to the verdict today of guilty on all three counts. I think most of the country would acknowledge that was doing the right thing from the jury perspective. And you know, we have to talk about it. What does this mean? You know, what does the emotion, the outcome, the verdict really mean to our nation and our world? And it's important to get a business perspective on that. So Thomas, I'm gonna ask you, as you know, I'm sorry, Bruce, I'm gonna go to you. As an executive at Jabil, a global company, what's your reaction to what happened today?
Yeah, this is certainly something that's galvanized the nation, and it's certainly galvanized our employees. And it's something that we've talked about internally to our company when the incident first occurred, and it's something that we continue to talk about. And interestingly enough, our topic today is the engagement of business and community. And again, what we have now is an engagement opportunity between business and community. In this particular case, it's not necessarily a lesson to be learned. It should be the beginning of something that substantially changes how we operate within this company and how we treat each other. And while, again, you know, the verdict may be satisfying to some, I doubt that it's satisfying to many, in that we have a long, long way to go before we get to a place where each and every individual is comfortable being where they are, when they are, and who they are. And that's really the intent. And we got a long way to go. So programs like these certainly begin the process, but we need to get some greater traction behind the efforts and collaboratively between business. And again, you see business now commenting more and more frequently on political and social issues. And I believe that that's the right course. Not leaving it up to the politicians, not necessarily leaving it up to special interest group, but businesses being engaged and being involved as leaders within the community.
Thank you so much for providing that perspective, and I think it's well stated. We're gonna go ahead and shift into our discussion around the DEI community outreach approach and business, and some of the lessons we can learn today as being a part of this wonderful USF certificate program. Shalina, I want to start with you. Bloomin' Brands has publicly provided its voice in support of ending systemic racism and to becoming a more inclusive organization. And one of the commitments your company has shared is around partnering with organizations that really align with that statement to ending racial justice. Can you speak to the approach Bloomin' Brands has recently taken in the area of community partnership and development?
Absolutely. Thanks for the introduction. I'll tell you that similar to the way this program is shaped, the certificate program is shaped, we started internally. And our internal mission is to create a more inclusive organization. But that was really personal to our CEO, Dino. Dino is a Minnesotan. So when he saw that video, he connected to what was happening in his hometown, in his community, in a different way than some of us. And that has driven the organization to think and act intentionally different than we have in the past. And as you mentioned, his passion for addressing systemic racism has cascaded throughout the entire organization. For the past 33 years, Outback Steakhouse has been a community pillar in Tampa Bay. And that carries throughout the country. everywhere we have restaurants, our proprietors are connecting with the local community organization. But what had to be different for us this time was similar to other organizations committing dollars to help and support the Black community. We didn't want to just write a check. We wanted to make sure we gave our proprietors an opportunity to connect locally with organizations. And we found that the National Urban League had a footprint that matched the geography of our restaurants. But more importantly, we found that the National Urban League values aligned with ours. And their mission to provide jobs, education, and an entrepreneurship mindset to the community perfectly aligns with our principles and beliefs, which are about proprietorship. So with that, in the process, I partnered with our Director of Community Outreach, Elizabeth Watts. We vetted several organizations. We found 14 local affiliates. And then I was inspired by my 15-year-old who said to me, "Mommy, I just joined the National Urban League of Hillsborough County." And in my research, I was like, I haven't seen a local affiliate in Hillsborough County. But as soon as he said that, I reached out to this gentleman on screen, Stanley Gray, and I learned that he was leading the effort to rejuvenate the Urban League in Hillsborough County. And that's when it made the decision for me, in our own backyard, we can make an impact in our community. We can help to get this organization off the ground. And I became personally committed to supporting Stan in the effort. We found that this has been a successful partnership, not just because across the country, we're feeding volunteers who are helping the homeless. We're feeding voters who are trying to get to the polls and volunteers who are helping voters get to the polls. But we are also doing hiring events and giving people an opportunity to start a job with us and learn how to run a business and be on the pathway to proprietorship. That's really what makes this partnership unique, is we're aligned on our values. We have a geographic footprint that matches, and right in our own backyard, we can make an even bigger splash by supporting Stanley and his effort to the Hillsborough County chapter.
That's great. Thank you, Shalina, for sharing that background and context on how Bloomin' Brands has really engaged in the community. Stanley, I want to shift. I want to ask you, as a military veteran and businessman, your career truly has bridged service and business. And more recently, you've helped lead a community dialogue about the need to do more to ensure economic equity for African American and minority communities. Shalina mentioned very, very well that this connection to her company and the aligned values. Can you speak to the role business has played in this effort that you've led, and more specifically, can you add to what Shalina has said about the partnership with Bloomin' Brands?
Well, I think that Shalina's really kind of covered all the bases, probably 2 or 3 times. But one of the things that you really have to look at when you look at the mission of the Urban League, and that's to bring or assist with the attainment of economic equity. And if you're a realist about it, the first thing that you have to understand is that many people have lost hope. And there's like this little circle of hopelessness. So what you have to do is figure out a way to break that. And what we've decided to do is that we don't work with any company that does not pledge to help people get to $21 an hour, which is a living wage, within 2 years. Now, that's not a guarantee. That's not like step promotions or step increases. You have to do the work, you have to attain the skills, and you have to perform. But we found that there are a lot of companies and organizations that have that ability within our community, but they're not doing it. Now, we've also decided that we are going to be an organization that is going to be focused on relationships with our community partners and organizations and companies. And the reason why is that we're going to produce something that everybody in the community is going to have a benefit from. I mean, why wouldn't you want to have a homegrown, well-trained, and well-worked workforce, as opposed to being reliant on government grants and the likes. So the relationship with Bloomin' Brands, really works perfectly for us, because one is our philosophies match up, our temperaments match up, and our ultimate goals match up. And we have like probably 2 or 3 within the community, but I'd like to stand up and give them a shout out because they were the first. And it's not about money. I mean, granted, we want your money, okay? I'm not going to lie about that. But it's not about that. It's more about, giving us or helping us with funds to operate, but also helping us find opportunities for people so they can, buy their own homes. They can buy their own electricity. They can buy their own food. We are a collaborative, hands-up organization. And organizations like, MUMA Brands, they help us execute our mission in the manner that we want to do it.
That's great. Stanley, one of the things that I've heard you describe, and I kind of want you to dive a little deeper if I can ask you, is you talked about this importance of having a commitment on both sides of the partnership to community outcomes and the impact that takes place in the community. Can you talk more about that shared commitment on not just the aligned values, but on actually the outcomes of the work?
Well, I'll give you a real good example. Our whole giving process, we call it performance-based giving. And when we approach a potential partner, we have 5 areas that we work in: employment, education, medical, housing, and judicial. And what we do is we say, which one of these areas would you like your monies or your fund to be committed to? And then what we do is we come up with some goals and objectives collectively. Now, we ask for a 3-year give. If we don't execute to what our commitment is, that is the Urban League of Hillsborough County's commitment, we don't expect the commitment to be executed in second and third from our partner. And I think that that's a very realistic and fair way to look at things.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Bruce, I want to head over to you again. You are leading a manufacturing solutions company that has over 260,000 employees across the globe. So that means that capacity, that footprint, that reach has huge potential in terms of community outreach. So here in Tampa, I know, in our previous planning sessions, we've talked about how you're really focused on closing the socioeconomic gap in our community and mobilizing your employees around that. Can you talk a little bit about that approach, and then your partnership with Feeding Tampa Bay as a key partner in helping to deliver on that mission?
Be glad to. I first want to. Most of my career has been credited by borrowing others' ideas. So the first thing I want to do is invite Stanley to come out and meet with Jabel so that we can learn more about the program. So Stanley, you have an open invitation to reach out to us here on St. Pete, on the other side of the bridge. I think what I'd like to talk about first is we're not doing things differently here than we do anyplace else in the world, right? And so we believe there are 4 foundation areas that we concentrate on. We want to do well financially because we're a publicly traded company and we have shareholders that have an expectation. But we also want to do well we want to do good in the communities in which we live and work. And it's an and proposition. And by the way, that proposition is beginning to resonate with the investment community, with bankers, with shareholders. We certainly have the full support of the board to make certain that it's just not about making money. It's in fact a purpose-driven organization. And so that's the first piece. And that's imbued everywhere around the world, is when you join our organization, doing well financially and doing good in the community is part of what we do. Right? We're also committed to decentralization of decision-making. So we trust our employees to make business decisions each and every day, no matter where they are. And we trust our employees to understand what's going on in their communities and to get engaged in their communities with their issues. By definition, we're a diverse company because we're in every geography, right? But there are unique circumstances in each community, and we don't want to dictate that, okay? Thirdly, we want to be a lifetime employer. We want this to be the last place you ever work. And we marry that again to our community engagement. We want partners that we have long-term relationships with, not just now, not particular. We will do things on occasion that are one time, but our genuine interest, very similar to Shalina, is not simply giving money, right? It's sweat equity. And by the way, we're a manufacturer and we have great skills. We got people that can put things together. We've got people that can really assist businesses and assist communities meaningfully. And then the fourth area of the foundation really is we don't have a budget. We're not going to dictate that you have a certain amount of money to spend each and every year, right? We believe that there's merit associated with every request that we get, and it really begins from the bottom up. It begins with our employees being passionate about what's going on in their community, approaching us for that level of engagement. And that really sometimes surprises people that we don't have a budget. Now, I don't want to say we have limitless money because everyone that's on this call today will come and call us. We say no more than we say yes. In the case of Thomas's organization, Feeding Tampa Bay, it's a relatively easy decision for us. We try to guide our employees in terms of the community engagement between education, right, health, and environmental consciousness. Right, we're a manufacturer. We want to leave this planet better than what we've inherited it. Right. In this particular case, in our community, we've got 2,000 people that live all across Tampa Bay. They're not all in Pinellas or Hillsborough County. They're everywhere. And when we recognized that there was an opportunity where we had folks, we had 1.7 million of our neighbors as a result of COVID and economic issues that were going on that had food insecurity. We always look for the partners that have similar values, very similar to what Stanley and Shalina have done. In this case, we had an organization that, again, high integrity. You know what's going on. They were certainly looking for money, but they were looking for sweat equity, and they were looking for leadership. And those are the three areas that we like to contribute to. And again, we want to make a longer term relationship with an organization. And by the way, and Thomas can certainly talk to this himself, this is not just handing out meals to the 1.7 million of our neighbors. And that's how we think about it. Stanley talked about hiring people local. That's what we do. We want people to be local. We want to hire local people. We want them to stay local, and we want to move them up in our company. And so we're a lifetime community advocate. We're a lifetime employer, and it plays very well to an organization that also has stretch and reach outside of the immediate Tampa Bay area in terms of their affiliation with Feeding America.
Thank you for that, Bruce. Thomas, as Bruce mentioned, you're on the front lines of fighting hunger, right? Feeding Tampa Bay is committed to that. Much of the resources and support that Feeding Tampa Bay receives comes through the development of business partnerships, and you have many corporate partners. So can you talk to us about your experience in developing those partnerships and what's worked well and what hasn't?
Thank you, and thanks for having me on the panel tonight. I'm excited to be here, and listening to my colleagues speak inspires, I think, all of us and reminds us why we do what we do. So, Braulio, when we think about our work at Feeding Tampa Bay, we believe that the provision of food, which we do, as well as the provision of resources in the form of training, job training, other benefits and services, are about the creation of equity. They allow the folks that we serve to find a place of equity in the communities they live by providing resources that otherwise their household wouldn't have. So fundamentally, as we think about our work, that's at the core of what we do. And everybody has used the same word, and I want to use that word again now, which is this is about community. We all live in this community. We all care about this community. We were all fortunate to find ourselves in this community. And again, as Bruce just said a moment ago, as we think about something like the pandemic, but we also know it's true of the issues that came out through the Chauvin trial that were mentioned earlier. This is all about the neighbors that we have, the friends that we live next door. In our vocabulary, there is no them. There's an us. And the reality of what we're trying to do is find a way to create a community that benefits all. We fundamentally believe that communities are made stronger, not by the top, but by the bottom. If you lift the folks who are struggling the most up further, it lifts the entire community. And I think talking about values, and Bruce mentioned this about his corporation, which I think is incredibly important, is that is their giving theology is driven by their colleagues. And I think that sends such a strong message to everybody around how we approach good partnership. And so to answer your question specifically, what good charities do is we allow organizations and corporations, as we often say, to connect with their best selves. All the corporations that we would talk today, Blooming Brands and Jabil, but many, many others, really want to have an impact in the community. And when we do our job well, we provide pathways to make that happen. Right. So as Bruce mentioned, we would have a multi-platform relationship with someone like Jabil. They provide us funds, which of course is helpful, but they provide us volunteers. And they did that during a very difficult time with Jabil, but they also give us the opportunity to give voice to our cause. One of the greatest challenges all of us in the nonprofit arena have is getting a loud enough voice to stand up and say, this issue matters. We need folks to come alongside, and will you help us with that? And Jabil being willing to do that, to give the power of their voice to our cause, lifts our work in ways that we couldn't otherwise do it. So if you're familiar with churches, it's time, talent, and treasure, but it's also the gift of voice. And so as we think about all of our partners, we want for them to believe strongly in the cause that we're here to support. We want them to be committed to our community. I loved the way that that the Urban League was talking, and Stanley was talking about, that they have certain standards by which they want to conduct themselves and their partnerships. Because when we look at food insecurity and we look at equity, we look at the work that we do, we think about it with three different groups of people. Those we serve with, our colleagues, those we serve alongside our partners like Jabil, and those we serve. And when we look at a lens of equity, we need to make sure that everybody in those relationships have a place of equity, and that all the relationships we're in with those folks care about equity. Because ultimately, and you've heard this a couple of times today, what we all understand is that good commitment and partnership starts with similar values. And I feel 100% comfortable in saying that Jabil, Bruce, and I all have the same values, which is a desire to make sure that our community is better, a desire to make sure that our neighbors who need a hand up get it, a desire to make sure that we work collaboratively and collegially to make sure that the community we choose to call home is the best place that we all could dream of.
Thomas, thank you for that. I want us to go a little deeper now, and as we think about what's ahead. You know, what are some lessons that we've learned? You know, what are some things that we can be doing better as a business community and as community partners? And Shalene, I want to start with you, because I think there's some lessons learned within the Blooming Brands philosophy and approach to community partnership, and I'd love to hear from you. What are some of those lessons? Are there discussions happening right now internally that are really aimed at being better, getting more targeted with how you partner?
Absolutely. You know, I want to reflect back to 2020. As we're in the middle of two pandemics, you have organizations turning their Instagram into Black squares and making commitments of huge dollars, and specifically saying, we want to provide financial support to the Black community and communities of color. But everyone's reaching out at the same time. So one of the lessons we learned is, as we're reaching out and the other organizations are reaching out, there is a vetting process. As Stanley mentioned, he has a standard for corporate partners, and we have to be patient in that vetting process, just as much as we were intentional about finding organizations that align with our values. Organizations like the Urban League are out there looking for people who align with their values. And so you cannot get tired in this work. If you are going to be committed, you have to stick it out for the long haul. And sometimes it takes a few sessions to really find out, do we have the right synergies? Is this going to be a successful long-term partnership? You know, we were committing to 5 years of partners across the country, and who are we going to select? Because this is supposed to be a marriage, not a dating relationship. So I think there's intentionality in how we go about finding those partners, but we also have to be patient with the process and give organizations the opportunity to vet you, as well as the other hundreds of corporations reaching out to make sure they have the right connections.
Thank you, Shalina. That's a great point. I want to build on that a little bit, because you talked about being intentional. You talked about vetting and being very focused on who you partner with, and you had a tone about you really touched on readiness. You touched on this idea of being ready for partnership. And Stanley, I want to go to you, because the last several years, there's been a huge emphasis on racial justice and colorism, and this idea of we need to do more as a business community in helping our black neighbors. And so from your perspective, I can only imagine that you saw a wave of interest coming your way to the Urban League, because the Urban League is the Urban League. And how many new relationships came your way versus established relationships and those trusted relationships? Can you speak to how you navigate this wave of interest from new relationships to those that are trusted and long-term?
Well, I guess I'm going to add a little reality to this. One of the things is the Urban League actually went out of business about 18 years ago. And the manner that it did so, it really upset a lot of people. And when I'm saying a lot of people, is more people within the African-American community. The Urban League really didn't have a lot of strong business relationships. I'd probably say 70 to 80% of their capital came from grants. And as I've indicated a few minutes ago, that is not something that you really want to do. One of the real challenges that we have, and I'm just going to be very blunt, is that a lot of times the organizations or companies that aren't really committed to true growth and true equity and equality, what they do is they take the easy way. And that is they go listen to the loudest voices, okay, within the African-American community. And a lot of times those loudest voices, they really don't have the interests of the whole African-American community. They have the interests of themselves. Well, if you're not really committed in a relationship that's measurable, the easy path is to listen to the loud voices. And the loud voices usually complain, but they never talk about what they can have, but they tell you what they don't have. Well, the organization that we are building, we're not in that mantra at all. And again, like as Shalina indicated, we think it's a marriage, so we need to both vet each other, okay? Because we're not looking for, now granted, I would like somebody to just give me a lot of money, like with 6 or 7 figures, but the truth of the matter, that's not going to happen. I would like it, but the truth is, I really want somebody who could give us some committed funds and could commit their employees to be a part of the solution. Because see, we're looking for this as a long term, not as a short term. And I'll be very truthful with you. There is a lot of corporate guilt money out there. And I can tell you, we've been very disciplined by not going after it.
Excellent. Really appreciate that point, Stanley. Bruce, when you think about Jabil, and even earlier, you provided an invitation for Stanley to come over and have a discussion on how Jabil might be able to support and align missions. What are the discussions taking place within Jabil around being better, doing more, being more focused? I mean, can you speak to some of those conversations and maybe some specifics on where you see opportunities?
Yeah, there's a lot of advantages to being a large company, and there's a lot of disadvantages to being a large company. And when you have 260,000 employees in over 30 countries, somehow they can be defined as employees and not individuals. And so we're having a focus, we're having discussion, we're doing surveys. It begins with, again, one of our core values, which is respect for the individual. We demand and we expect everyone in the workplace to respect their colleague. They don't have to agree with their views. They don't have to do the same activities. They can be as different as they'd like to be. And that, I think we do a fairly good job. What we really want to migrate to is we want everyone in our organization. We believe that we hire the whole person, right? When you're at work, you sometimes think at home, and when you're at home, you sometimes think of work. And again, we're engaged in the community with your family. So we like to believe we hired the whole person. And we want that person to be authentic in who they are. And most importantly, we want 260,000 individuals to say that I feel comfortable at work. I can be me. And I can be accepted, and I can be respected, and I can be given the opportunities to advance my career should I choose to be, irrespective of any type of differences that we have. And we've made a real effort at that. We've listened. We've got a diversity council from folks around the globe. And again, that's very intriguing when you're bringing people in from Asia and Europe and different people of color, et cetera, in this diversity council, because again, not everyone is equally aligned on what their agenda is. What's most important for us is listening to our audience, listening to our single biggest competitive advantage, which are the people that actually work with us each and every day. And so if you listen to the employees, whether it's engagement in the community or whether it's enhancing your work environment in the DEI area, I think you're well served. And there's no resistance from our leadership team to listen, but perhaps there's been too many assumptions that we need to correct on a go-forward basis.
Thank you for that transparency, Bruce, and that acknowledgement of there's more work to do, right?
Yeah.
We've got areas that we can improve on, and I think that speaks to all of us and all of our organizations where we work. Thomas, whether you're for-profit or nonprofit, right? The commitment to DEI is in both sectors, right? And so, Thomas, can you speak to some of the conversations you've been having within your leadership team around diversity and equity and inclusion on areas that you see opportunities for improvement?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, because I think, as everybody has said, and I think Shalina said this at the beginning, which is important, we had a saying internally: no sneaker commercials. We weren't going to go out and issue some sort of statement that said we understood, we're committed, we thoughtfully did not do any of that. What we did was, we had already had a culture partner on board, but we also brought in a DEI partner, and we spent 6 months listening to our colleagues, starting to institute training programs to help us better understand. And I would say, in many ways, as an organization that is really committed to the idea that every human being we serve and serve with has a dignity and value that is esteemable and worth caring about and committing to. The reality is, we had some work to do as well, and we wanted to spend some time listening, understanding. I heard stories from some of our colleagues in circumstances that they had been in when they went to a particular place and delivered food, and the way in which they were treated, or some of the stories of their own personal circumstances that talking about them now, you can't help but feel emotional and think no human being in this world should go through that. And it really helped reframe our conversation internally. And so we have been building out, like every other good organization, to make sure that we have practices and programs over the longer haul. Because if we're going to be honest and true in the community, we have to be honest and true in our organization. And so we had work that we had to do and will need to do. And so from that, I think if you're watching this module, the very first thing you have to understand is that if you're not who you think you are or say you are, there's no way that you can be who you think you are or say you are in the community. And I think for us, that was a watchword and has been a watchword as we move forward. And I want to tie one other piece to this, which is what Stanley mentioned. There is a huge difference in our world between a donor and a partner. A donor simply wants to use you, perhaps to make a donation, but they want to use you or your cause to say, hey, I'm going to give you some support. but partners step into the moment with you. They step into the cause with you. They step into the opportunity with you. And as Shalina and the Urban League talked about, they have a long-term relationship where they're both very committed to what they're doing. I would think Bruce and I feel the same way, but I think that's what we hope that corporations do, that community citizens do, that everybody says, let's step into the causes we care about and make sure that we invest. Because again, I'll use another church reference. If you want to know what you care about, look at your date book or your checkbook, because those are the two ways you know what you're committed to. And I think for all of us, when I would look at somebody like Jabel, I would say that if they looked at their checkbook or their date book, they have a significant degree of commitment to the issues that we care about. And then turning the question back to us, I feel strongly that we're doing the hard work necessary to make sure that we can be the organization that every one of our colleagues stands up and says, I'm proud to work here and I'm proud to do this work here.
Braulio, if I could, I just want to add some emphasis to this, because I looked at the demographics of the audience that's listening to us today, and I want to make certain that people recognize, this is not just a U.S. problem. Mm-hmm. We have our own issues here. It's not just a race issue. It's not a gender issue. There are issues all around the globe that need to be addressed, and engagement becomes very critical.
Stanley, go to you.
Well, to follow up what Bruce just said, I think that history repeats itself. And I would offer everybody who's listening on this to read the book Cast, because it'll give you a real broad perspective of the challenges at hand. And it's not something that we alone in the United States experience, but unfortunately, we've kind of written the book on discrimination in the United States. And I'm not trying to get anyone all riled up about it, but if you read this book and then don't believe everything that the author says, I want you to go do your own research, especially the first 100 pages. You'll see that there's opportunities at hand to really maximize the whole entire workforce. I mean, how as a nation, how are we going to continue to do when we are right now throwing away 30 to 40% of our workforce? We're writing them off. We can't continue to do that.
Yeah. So Stanley, I appreciate that, because it adds some balance to this idea that the U.S. has played a role in leading the world in its consciousness, if you will, as it relates to race, right? So there's, a lot of folks look to the U.S. for our leadership on issues, and in the race area, I think it's fair to say we've dropped the ball. It's way out of bounds, right? And we've got a long way to go. And I think it's the U.S. responsibility to help lead the world again. But in this case, lead the world on race relations and racial equity. We have that opportunity as a country, but it takes business leadership as well. We're not going to be able to do that just from a ground up. We need business leaders to come alongside us.
Again, I think that you're right. It takes business leaders, but the business leaders have to start asking some questions. Why is it the way it is? Okay, and I'm just going to throw you a couple examples. I graduated 44 years ago from the United States Naval Academy. My class today still has the largest African-American male class that ever graduated from Naval Academy. Up to 2 years ago, we were the largest African-American class, male or female, that graduated from Naval Academy. There's no excuse for that. I served in the United States Marine Corps. I was the first African-American reconnaissance company commander. The second one was 30-something years after me, and he looks just like me. For those of you who do not understand the word colorism and the concepts of it, that I'm telling you a whole lot. I think that we, as a business community, have an opportunity to set standards and go forward. I mean, and I do believe that with collaborative, focused, and committed relationships, I think that we have an opportunity to be a model. And I'm not just saying that to say that. I really believe that we can. Today's real quick, today's verdict really basically said that we're going to hold you accountable if you are in a state of misconduct. I think that when you look at all these things, this just shows you that we have the right temperature to get right on this subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stanley, it takes leadership. Shalina, before I go to you, I just want to know it takes leadership, right? And leadership within our organizations is critical. We have our board governance structure, we have our executive leadership structure, and when you apply the lens of race and gender on the boards that we're seeing across the country, on the senior executive leadership that we're seeing across the country, there's a lot of work to do there. And I think it's with that diversity at that level that begins to help inform and bring additional acumen, if you will, to an organization that will help bring out some of the solutions. Shalina, what are your thoughts?
Boy, you just dropped a lot there, so there's a lot to unpack, so give me a minute. I wanted to jump off of Stanley's comment, but it ties back to what Bruce was saying. If we're going to shift this workforce, we have to listen to our people. And I continue to be inspired by the generation that follows the millennials, and I have a couple in my household. And the reason I'm inspired is because they are challenging systems and they are breaking processes, but also in 2020, this young group of 18 and under was the first group where the majority population was people of color. They are Black, Hispanic, and so get ready. There is a shift coming in this country. So we need to prepare ourselves now for a workforce that looks very different 5-10 years from now, and put ourselves in a position to engage them and make sure that there is space for them to truly be their best self, as Thomas said. But when you talk about board seats, I really appreciate you saying that, because I'm on a board of a nonprofit out of Chicago because I have a passion for helping young Black girls like me who grew up on the streets of Chicago and the South Side in the neighborhood of Inglewood. And there could be a very different story that I would tell about myself if there weren't for community organizations like the Urban League, like the Girl Scouts even, who would look at us and say, we want you to be a part of this organization. But there are too many people chasing titles. And when I think about my relationship with Stanley, it would be very easy for me to say, hey, I want to sit on your board of directors. I have something to put on my resume, something to tell people about in my organization. I told Stanley I would rather sit on the advisory board where my sweat equity, my talent, my skills as a community organizer, as a logistics person and operations leader can be most effective in activating the next generation. And I think that we need more people with a heart for this work and less people chasing a title and recognition and resume building.
Well, we have just a few minutes left. Thank you, Shalina. I completely agree. There's a lot of work to be done. And I think we all have an opportunity through partnership and through constructive dialogue and trust building to really make that happen across all sectors in all industries. I just want to thank everybody. But before we close out, I want to ask Bruce and Thomas any final words, since we kind of went around the horn a little bit. Any final words on what we've been discussing?
Well, I would just ask that the folks that are listening to this do something. There's 140,000 people on the call. If 140,000 people do something, now that begins to make a dent. And again, in our company, every voice makes a difference. And to Shalina's point, people, the new generation coming in, they really believe their voice makes a difference.
Absolutely.
So go out and do something. Make something happen. Listen to your employees. They'll let you know where you should be engaged.
Thank you. Thomas, last word.
I would just say that great communities are built by great committed organizations and people. And that's, if you want to live in a great community, get involved.
Thank you. Great final statement. Thank you, everybody, for participating in this panel. Shalina, thank you. Stanley, thank you so much. Bruce, appreciate you being here. And Thomas, thank you so much for your time. This has been great.
Giving back to our local communities has been a core element of Jabil's culture since the company was founded in 1965. And now, over 50 years later, our belief is even stronger that we have a responsibility to make a difference in the communities where we work and live. But what makes J-Bill unique is that we empower our 100-plus global locations to decide which charities to support based on the needs of their local community. We simply ask our sites to support charitable organizations that align to our J-Bill Cares focus areas of education, empowerment, and the environment. And while our efforts are locally driven, the impact is global. J-Bill provides educational opportunities to students in underserved communities, empowering them to explore science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and invite local schools and universities to tour our facilities. Many locations also offer internships to students interested in pursuing a career in manufacturing. Our sites also donate much-needed school supplies in their local communities. Throughout the world, J-Bill uplifts people in underrepresented communities by providing opportunities, giving individuals the tools to overcome challenges and achieve success. J-Bill believes people with disabilities deserve opportunities to shine bright and realize their true potential, mirroring our commitment to inclusivity in the workplace. J-Bill recently entered into a partnership with the 2022 Special Olympics USA Games. In addition to financial support, J-Bill employees are volunteering their expertise in a variety of areas leading up to and including the Games. J-Bill helps empower those in foster care homes, elderly care facilities, and orphanages through much-needed donations, and our sites regularly hold food drives to help local food pantries. We believe that preserving our environment for future generations and our sites actively participate in reforestation, coastal habitat restoration, litter removal, and recycling programs throughout the globe. J-Bill Cares will continue to encourage employees to connect with meaningful causes in their local communities and provide opportunities to give back and make a difference. We remain steadfast in our goal to improve the lives of those in generations to come.
Thank you again to the panelists for the enlightening discussion on the impactful community outreach through their partnerships. Together, may we all continue to do more for our community. Before we transition into our educational segment, I want to share a personal story with you all. As a former collegiate student athlete, collegiate coach, and now a professor in the Vinnick Sport and Entertainment Management program, I have leveraged sport as a tool to earn all three of my degrees, to navigate the male-dominated and prominent industry, to travel the world, pre-pandemic that is, to serve and empower others, and to educate the next generation. And while I played several sports growing up, I never played hockey. And before 2014, I had never attended a hockey game. However, I did learn about the Tampa Bay Lightning, not because of their successes on the ice, but because of how they use hockey as a tool to serve the community with their employee volunteer hours, to create access by putting a stick and a puck in every child's hands, to showcase the cultural richness of art, and to honor our community heroes. In short, it is because of their investment in our community that I learned about the Tampa Bay Lightning. Now, let me share my slides. Launched in 2011, the Lightning Community Hero Program has distributed $20 million to deserving heroes and nonprofits throughout the Tampa Bay community. For each of the Lightning home games, even during a lockout and the pandemic, they honor a local hero and donate $50,000 to a nonprofit charity. For those of you living in Tampa, You may have personally experienced this transformational community investment. But for those of you across the world, here is a video of the impact such gifts can have on a community.
I am Liz Gutierrez. I am the founder and CEO of Enterprising Latinas, and I was selected and honored to receive a Community Hero Award in 2017. At Enterprising Latinas, we believe that when women do well, their children do better, and our community does too. And so as an organization, we focus on Latinas and women in general and help them to build their capacity so that they can have economic prosperity. So the Community Hero Award comes with a $50,000 grant. And our organization was so small that the foundation couldn't give us the entire grant. We actually shared the grant with another nonprofit. Since then, our organization has gone from a one-person operation now to a 15-member team, and we are really changing the character and face of the community of Waimama. So we have today now a center that we have called the Waimama Opportunity Center that stands there as a result of your investment and the investment of so many others. But I'll have to say that $35,000, when I accepted the award, I wrote down that we were going to buy a building and that we were going to create a center. And really, it was just a dream. I didn't think it was really going to happen anytime soon. Well, less than 2 years later, we had that building. And that $35,000 became the seed money that we used to make that purchase. Today, we're serving thousands of people in that center. And so for my part, thank you for that investment. And thank you for being part of our journey to create opportunities for women in Tampa Bay.
Thank you again to our certificate partner, the Tampa Bay Lightning, especially for impactful community outreach and making this DEI in the workplace certificate accessible to all. Now, as we begin our journey learning about the value of community outreach for DEI in the workplace, I'd like to introduce our team of educators. I'm Dr. Janelle Wells, and we also have Dr. Doreen McCauley and Mr. Corey Posey. On the next slide, you'll see what the three of us will be discussing. First, I'll talk about why community outreach matters, the role of social responsibility in our community outreach, and then I'll turn it over to Doreen and Corey, and they'll welcome some guests to discuss the importance of 5 main stakeholders. On the next slide, we begin this journey. It is important to start with why, the purpose of community outreach. So think about yourself in your role as an individual, figuratively. Do you reach up to climb that corporate ladder? Do you also reach down to lift the next person up? Do you reach forward? Do you reach behind? Do you reach across? And do you reach in within yourself? Now reach beyond yourself. Think about how you operate within an organization, and that organization operates within an industry, and that industry operates within the society. How have you made a difference within your organization? And then how is now your organization operating within the industry? How have they evolved the industry? And finally, how does your industry function as part of a greater society, impacting change? Imagine this collective strength of everyone, beginning with each of you, reaching further to have an active role in community outreach, meeting where they are. The benefits of such community outreach would exponentially build accountability and trust in our community. It would create strong, healthy, vibrant places to live, work, and learn. And it would also help in the discovery of community assets, skills, resources, and responsibilities. On the next slide, we will focus on the responsibilities. We'll discuss the most widely recognized pyramid corporate social responsibility. And you see that there's 4 components to this. Beginning at the base, economic. This is be profitable, right? Then we've talked about legal responsibility, and we've seen that in previous modules, right? About obeying the law, these laws of society, codification of what's right and what's wrong. And so ethical. Be ethical. There's an obligation to do what is right, what is just, and what is fair. And then at the top here, this philanthropic, be a good corporate citizen. Weave this into the fabric of your organization. On the next slide, and do know in the resources that we provide in this module, we will provide more thought-provoking questions for each of these levels, okay? Notice in these slides, there's a shift in responsibilities, particularly at the base of the pyramid. And while Carroll's pyramid is the most widely referenced, it does come with criticism, and it has evolved over the last 4 decades. And we know now performative CSR efforts are bad for business because consumers, they're filled with mistrust and doubt, right? Especially in the light of emerging media platforms and purposely driven generations. Consumers are wondering and they're publicly questioning the motives behind your CSR. So on the next slide, you'll see research claims that CSR activities that are authentic and sincere are going to lead to higher customer loyalty, better image, and credibility. Now let's turn it over to Dr. McCauley, who will introduce our stakeholder frameworks.
Thank you very much, Janelle. I appreciate that. I'm going to go back just for a second before we leave this slide, because those of you who have been watching through all of the different modules, remember from the first module, I talked about this tree and how with this tree at the beginning, I had it as an analogy for how we needed to be looking at things both from, that kind of the logical as well as the emotional side of things. Well, I'm taking another tree analogy in for you today. And what I'm going to say to you is that whatever you choose to do with your outreach, so as we're going through this and you hear about opportunities for you to be able to find ways to reach out to the community, be authentic, right? And for an analogy, think of, have you ever been in an office that has had real trees versus fake trees? Right? You don't want fake trees, right? You don't want to put something up in your organization just for the sake of doing it. It'll look pretty for a little while, but it never grows, right? It never changes. And that's all it is. It's just pretty. So when we're going through and we're talking about outreach today, I want you to talk and think about a tree growing, right? And that as you succeed and you reach back to the community around you, then everyone succeeds more and that tree grows even more. So just a thought for you to remember. So now I'm going to go on to the actual frame. So we wanted to give you a concept frame around outreach because there is a lot to talk about when we talk about outreach. And so what we thought we would do is that we would invite some people to talk to us today that are experts in these areas to help highlight just these 5 categories. So we're going to be looking at the labor pool, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about what does the labor pool of the future look like, right? And how does that define why it's important for you to understand diversity, equity, and inclusion and really take it seriously in your workplace. Then we're going to talk about customers, potential customers that are out there. Then we're going to talk about suppliers. Now we have touched on supplier diversity, but we do have someone here with us today that's going to give us kind of both sides, if you will, looking at it from how do you engage diverse suppliers, but then also how, as an organization maybe that is owned, a marginalized group, if you are someone who is say a women-owned organization, what can you do to get others to notice you when you're looking at the supply chain opportunities or the opportunities for B2B for you? Then the next one is going to be looking at board members. We're going to be looking at the board development in the organizations and what can you do to help your board and work with your board to ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that is a strategic goal, something that is adopted and that continues on beyond just certain initiatives that you're going to have. And then finally, we're going to talk about community outreach. And so with community outreach, we're going to be looking at how do we get out into the community as companies and as individuals in the companies to ensure that we are really trying to raise everyone up. And again, to what Janelle had mentioned, is that we need to ensure that we understand that changes in diversity, equity, and inclusion are only going to happen if everyone works together. So for the first one we're going to talk about is the labor force. And I'm actually going to invite in Dr. Edwin Morano, and he is going to speak with us today about the workplace. He is an instructor at the University of South Florida, the MUMA College of Business, but he is also the owner and founder of Human Capital, which is a consulting company, and he specializes in looking at millennial workforce, looking at the Latino workforce, and then as well looking at the Asian workforce. And he's going to share with us some of his wisdom today. So thank you very much, Dr. Marino, for being here, and I will hand over the floor to you now.
Thank you so much, Dr. McCauley. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. So just to give you a little backdrop for all of you to understand, I come, as I tell my students, I come from where they're going. I started in the diversity inclusion world in the Air Force. For the last 30 years, I've been in corporate America doing this kind of work, leadership and employee development work and executive coaching, and helping organizations help themselves along the journey of diversity and inclusion. Now, one of the other pieces I wanted to share with you is you're looking at this slide, the tagline there of today and tomorrow's workplace will be different. And that's no more truer now than ever before. As a baby boomer, I've watched change happen over time, but the more and more I read, write, and research into this area, I'm looking at the acceleration of change and the need for organizations and an important place that universities across the country play in this world. So as you see, there are some trends there when it comes to human technology and the future workforce. That is truly the future workforce, blended workforce to a large extent with artificial intelligence and just the acceleration of technology. The other piece that's playing in, and obviously an important place for universities to play a role in, is the skills gap that's happening across corporations, across the country and even the world. And the interesting thing about that, a lot of people think it's only about technical skills, but the reality is the importance of the interpersonal human people skills that's really gaining momentum. The other piece that goes with that is I've watched a shift over time on what we're calling make work human. And what we mean by that is that people are looking for purpose, happiness, a mission at work, and instead of just work overall. So having set that stage there with that left column, as you see there, the thing that's going on too is there's a lot of us being baby boomers today out there in the workplace. Some are retiring, but in reality, they're moving on and doing other phases in their career. They may retire from an organization, but they're continuing to contribute in society and are still a viable segment of the workforce out there. Because even though I'm about to speak about the millennials, and in particular Latino millennials, there's not enough millennials to a certain extent for the experience that the baby boomer aspect still has. And then, of course, the millennials, they've earned their front cover magazine on Time magazine. I don't mean to blow their bubble, but you know what? If you look back in time, all the other generations before them too had their time on Time magazine, no pun intended. And then lastly, it's the Latino millennials. They're really, out of the millennial segment, that is the biggest group. So if we can go to the next slide, I think you'll see what I mean. When it comes to the millennials themselves and the impact on society and work overall, they turn out to be the largest educated segment out there in the workforce. As a matter of fact, the oldest millennials just turned 41 this year. So they're the largest cohort to a large extent. And they're also the more diverse. The other thing is, and before I get into that, also most diverse, they also don't like to be marketed to, and they're the second most largest segment on purchasing online. So keep those things in mind, again, as you're looking at consumers out there and how do we reach out to them. Ironically, most organizations market to the millennials and they kind of put on the back burner the boomers. And that's another segment that shouldn't be forgotten too. So as you see there, they're also with this millennial workforce, they're also the most diverse. You can see the numbers there as they stack up. And as you can see, that is the future workforce. And as you see, it's shifting and changing. They have a $1 trillion spending power when it comes to from a consumer perspective. And so you can see that the future of this country is going to be more diverse just by the nature of the growth in those different segments that are happening there. We can go to the next slide, please. And so to put Latinos in perspective, and particularly Latino millennials, you need to understand there's 53 million Latinos in this country. And to put that in perspective, that makes the Latinos in this country, United States, #2 in the world with most Latinos, and #2 in the world where Spanish is spoken out of all the Latin American countries, including Spain. They are a $1.9 trillion consumer perspective. To put that in perspective, there are 193 countries in the world. just that segment alone would make it number 10th from a GDP perspective. And here's some of the key takeaways too. The average age of the Latino is 27 compared to the Anglo community is 40. For every Anglo that's born, for everyone that dies, one is born. For every Latino that dies, there are 8 born. So that shows you the exponential growth of that Latino community going forward. As a matter of fact, we have more from a GDP perspective than all 4 BRIC countries combined. However, here's the Achilles heel, and here's a great opportunity for the universities, for corporate America, and so forth. They're the least educated for a variety of reasons. And so there's a great opportunity here for them for schools, universities, and organizations to partner up and help these get increase their education, because at the end of the day, they're going to be part of the future workforce. The other piece that we need to keep in mind, in 2017, Latinos became the majority of entrants into the workforce. That was 4 years ago. And just I'm over here in Orlando, in Orange County, 2017, almost 50% of the high school students were Latinos. So that gives you a perspective of the exponential growth that's happening there. One of the other things that you want to keep in mind is that there's an interesting article out there, you can Google it on Forbes magazine, that's titled, "Without Hispanics, America's Corporations Can't Grow and Compete." So again, an important piece. But when it comes to diversity and looking at how we see the world, this particular thing here that you see, the Latino and the Anglo angles of how they see the world, this comes out of Dr. Rodriguez's book, where he looked at just some examples, how a Latino is maybe comes into the world with more from a humility perspective, where the Anglo community more from a self-expression, one of challenging authority versus respect authority. And I can speak personally to that because I've lived in a bilingual, bicultural world experience my life, having been born and raised in this country. So that's that piece there, and an important piece that universities and corporations need to keep in mind going forward. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Some considerations that organizations and institutions need to consider is, we need to recognize and maximize the workforce competitive edge. How do we do that? One, particularly from a USF perspective, is partner up with HR to create progressive practices and policies to make work more humanistic. We have a great new VP in our role over at the here on the campus, very proactive, very progressive. That's an opportunity. Not all organizations have those types of individuals, but organizations really need to look at partnering up with human resources. We need to enable leadership through behavioral change that holds people accountable and rewards. It's not just about diversity training. That's the one piece. But then when they go back into the organization, how are they being held accountable and what are they being rewarded for? We need to look at investment in the workforce. Remember the skills gap I talked about earlier, from both an interpersonal, humanistic perspective and technical skills. So training needs to be looked at as an investment and not an expense. Fourth, we need to maximize the DEI returns through behavioral practices that lead to organizational cultural change. These efforts are not just an effort in itself, it's a complete cultural shift, strategic shift that organizations have to build into the fabric of the organization in order to make these DEI efforts truly effective. The other thing we need to look at is improving work-life integration, especially now with the remote workforce work that exists today, particularly almost post-pandemic. And lastly, enable demand for flexibility, where and how people can work. Now that opens up the door for a bigger, broader market, consumer market share out there and workforce segment too. So at the end of the day, what this requires is a paradigm shift for both its leaders and organizations. And when there's a paradigm shift, that means that everything goes back to zero. We start new. It's the new normal. It's a new way of looking forward. It's no longer 20th century practices and policies, but more so 21st century practices and policies that we have to consider. So having said that, again, this is just a sliver of the demographics that are out there. There are broader aspects of it, but I just wanted to come and speak to you about this particular segment of it. That's an important segment going forward for society, for organizations and institutions like our university. So with that, I want to turn it back over to Dr. McCauley. I appreciate the opportunity of letting me come on and speak to you about this piece here.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. I truly appreciate you coming and sharing your experience with us, because it's really important for people to understand how these changes in the potential labor pool that they're going to be drawing from and how that's going to impact their organization. So thank you very much, Dr. Moreno, for being here with us today.
Thank you.
So the next one we're going to take a look at is looking at the customer side. Now, all of you have different customers, right? So we're not going to try to get into how can every industry look at this, but one of the things that we just really want to give you as a why of why it's so important for outreach and to understand is that your customer base is changing, right? So just like the labor pool is changing, so is the consumer base that you're going to be drawing from. And so we have kind of three main ideas that we want you to leave with today. So, and I tried for simplicity's sake to put it in an ABC so that people could remember it a little bit. So first of all is awareness or conscious consumers. People are more aware of what's going on in the world around them. Through social media, through other advancements in technology, people are aware of what's happening in the global market. And so you are on more of a stage, if you will. And so people are understanding. So the consumers that are out there are more aware of what's happening in the world around them. And you need to be aware of that as well and make change to meet that. The next one is the buying power of the marginalized individual. In the US alone, if we were to look at the marginalized communities from the EEOC standpoint, right, we're looking at over a $4 trillion buying power, right? And so what are you missing? Maybe if you are not making sure that either your products and services are meeting the needs of marginalized communities, or that maybe you're turning off marginalized communities because of practices that you have in your organization. So that's something to consider as well as why you want to really ensure that outreach is something that is a priority, a strategic priority for your organization. And the final thing is really, what are you doing in your organization to create opportunities to make sure that your products and services are developed with marginalized groups in mind? How are you doing that? Is that something you even consider, right? And maybe what are you losing as a result of that, right? If you look at the, the beauty industry alone is an industry, when we look at makeup, that, for many years didn't even realize, right, the diversity in their population that they were serving. And so there's many examples of that. And again, this will be in the resources for you to be able to take a look at. So just think of these, when you're really trying to understand the why, and why is this something that needs to perpetuate beyond just certain activities. So next I'm going to actually invite Jacqueline Schuler to come on with me now. And I am so happy to have Jacqueline with us. So Jacqueline is the Director of Global and Strategic Sourcing for AmJam. And for those of you who may not be familiar with AmJam, AmJam is actually one of the world's largest independent biotechnology companies in the world. And so I'm really, really pleased that Jacqueline was able to take time to come and speak with us today and to share her breadth of knowledge. And now, as some of you will remember back, that we did talk in a previous module, about supplier diversity. And so this is why we wanted to have someone come on today to talk about how can you really use supplier diversity to be able to extend out to your community and really make a difference, if you will. So thank you, Jacqueline, for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be part of this module and talk about supplier diversity, which is one of my favorite aspects of the role that I'm in.
So I guess the first thing we want to take a look at, AmJam is known for its excellence in supplier diversity. And so I guess the first thing we wanted to know and ask you today is that, do you mind sharing a little bit about the AmJam story and how you started in this process of really making supplier diversity a strategic goal for the organization?
Absolutely. The supplier diversity program at AmJam has been in place for more than 2 decades. And over that time, our program has grown into 9 what we call core facets. And each of the facets are at varying level of maturity, but all equally important as we continue to evolve our program. So it really starts with our small business program that focuses on maintaining adherence to government requirements and expectations. Another facet, outreach efforts, and that really means our active participation in not-for-profit organizations that support and promote diversity. Examples are with Women's Business Enterprise National Council and Diversity Alliance for Science. Outreach also includes benchmarking efforts with our peers in our industry, so we know where we stand and where we need to go. We focus on education and communication internally and externally, and oftentimes we talk about our program when we're also talking about our broad diversity, inclusion, and belonging efforts, and also our environmental, social, and governance program. We're looking at scope expansion always. Recently with increased focus on Black-owned business spend in the United States, and then also plans to expand our program globally. We look at ecosystem diversity, but really focuses on ensuring broader supply base, that they share our commitment to diversity, not only with their own diverse supply, which is often referred to as tier 2 spend, but also the diversity of their own staff and teams. One of the key facets that I get most excited about are intentional supplier development, which for Amgen means mentoring our existing diverse suppliers and also developing diverse suppliers in our communities and areas of need. And lastly, social impact, where we're actually going out and soliciting ideas from our diverse suppliers and leveraging our partnership with them to create broader impact in the community and for other causes.
Fantastic. Wow. It's so wonderful. You do have such a robust, program that you have there. And like you said, that it's really something that's kind of ingrained in the actual, organization. So that's so wonderful. I'm just wondering, some of the people that we have that are listening today, some may have programs already in place or maybe looking to have their programs. So do you mind giving us a couple of lessons learned, if you will, from your own experience that could help maybe someone who's looking to do this or to do it better in their own workplace?
Absolutely. I'm sure that Amgen is not unique when I say that your leadership and your organization plays a critical role in supplier diversity. And we're lucky at Amgen, we have support and commitment for supplier diversity from the top down. Our CEO, Bob Bradway, he's fully committed to all of our efforts in this area. Additionally, I think what we've learned over time is that active engagement in these not-for-profit organizations is really critical, and it helps us not only to socialize our program, its mission and goals, but it's also an opportunity for us to provide information to diverse suppliers, to engage them before an actual business need arises. And it allows them time to acclimate to our business and better understand our business so that the products and services that they're hopefully or potentially providing are suitable for our business needs.
Fantastic. So now on the flip side of that, are there any challenges or maybe little tumbles, if you will, or things that people should look out for? Or what are the things as far as advice to help someone else avoid maybe some of the challenges you have had?
Sure. The success of any supplier diversity program cannot be the responsibility of just one segment of the organization. It really has to be a collective effort across the entire organization. Even though our global strategic sourcing team is closest to the supplier diversity program, the responsibility truly is an organization-wide effort. And that's why one of our key facets is education and communication. Our employees really know the role that they play as organizational consumers, and they understand how supplier diversity impacts the communities that they live and work in, and also the communities in which our patients live and work in.
Fantastic. So just one last question, if you don't mind. We want to just kind of get an idea, because you've been talking at it from the point of view of the organization who goes out, but now I know you also do a lot of mentoring and have a program, so I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit on the opposite side. So if I am a minority-owned business, what are some of the things that I can do to get recognized by bigger organizations like Amgen?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I'm excited to share, what I think are three of the key components to that kind of success. So first would be determine if your target organization has a preferred way to receive information about your value proposition. For Amgen, we have a self-registration portal on our website that lets companies provide more than just basic details about, how their structure or, what their address is. It's an opportunity for them to share their unique value proposition as well. The second thing would be around mentoring. Ask your current or prospective clients if they have a B2B mentoring program that they might offer to their diverse suppliers. And if they don't have one, ask them to mentor you. Like I talked about earlier, at Amgen, we mentor our current suppliers. We share insights with them. We connect them to other internal departments and provide opportunities for them to share their story and their value proposition proactively. And the last thing would be is take an active role in those not-for-profit organizations that promote and support diverse suppliers. Beyond that, know which organizations your current and prospective clients are affiliated with and leverage the engagement tools and resources that they make available to you to get you connected to the right clients.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so very much for coming on and sharing with our participants today. We really appreciate your time. And just so everyone knows, that Jacqueline has provided us with a great resource page as well with some of the links to the organizations that she has mentioned. So that will be available for you on the MOOC, so you can have access. So thank you again, Jacqueline. Now I'm going to actually turn it over to my fellow presenter. And so Corey Moti is going to now speak about looking at the boards of an organization, looking out, and then as well looking at community outreach. So Corey, the floor is yours.
Absolutely, and thank you, Doreen. It's very important this evening that I talk to you about boards, and not to make any assumptions. When we're talking about boards, we're talking about a group of individuals that come together to set the strategic direction, the mission statement of your organization. It tracks the overall financial health of your organization, making sure that that group is moving in a good direction. And the reason why I wanted to share that with you is because when we think about board composition and we think about its impact on the organization, there really is no single place where a group of individuals can make specific change that will reverberate throughout the organization. So as you think about the boards at your organization, as you think about persons that sit in those seats, I challenge everyone on this training today to think through, are we getting the diversification of thought, of involvement, of connections to the community that we need within this organizational structure, right? I sit here to you today as an example of the importance of board diversification and board involvement. Once again, I'm at the University of South Florida, the Sarasota Manatee campus. A few years ago, there was a meeting and there was a conversation about students that attended our campus and what exactly our community outreach looked like. And as a result of that conversation, my position was created. So my position was created to address many of the concerns that our stakeholders had brought to our attention. But now let me drill a step further. We had a person who came onto our board who was a person of color. It was one of the first we had within that organizational structure. And that was the person that saw this glaring disparity as it relates to our student enrollments and who was in charge in terms of helping move these conversations forward. So now I'm seated in Sarasota Manatee to address many of those concerns. And I share that as an example of how strategic action at the board level can transition down to your organization. So really quickly, some execution strategies as you look to potentially diversify your board. Attend public board meetings. Where I see a lot of organizations and individuals not making grade is you're not aware of what's going on in your organization. You're not aware of the challenges. You're not aware of the opportunities. So take the initiative to go to meetings if you can and actually hear what's going on with your organization, because it'll give you a clearer understanding of what action might be needed next. Secondly, make specific recommendations that promote change. You can't walk into a space and say we need more diversity. What is that? You know, diversity is a myriad of things. Be specific in your asks and the type of diversity we need. You know, we need more people of color that work here. We need more opportunities in the community to give my gifts and talents to. So be specific in that ask. Call on community partners for board member nominations. You know, there is no one person that knows everyone, right? So lean on your partners, you know, lean on those organizations, many of whom who have helped us put together this diversity certificate, to ask, you know, who's out there that would make sense to be on our board to help us drive this work forward. Focus on track record and expertise versus demographics, right? We've heard this conversation already throughout this module. You know, no person of color represents all people of color, right? And just because you are from a diverse population does not mean that your mentality, your focus is diverse at all, right? That's an assumption many of us make. So when you're selecting someone to serve in your board seat, you really want to observe and make sure they are a representation, that they are diverse in their thought process and can add that representation to your board. So just wanted to really quickly hold organizational leadership accountable. How often have we gone to spaces and made recommendations and it feels like it has fallen on deaf ears, right? So if you make a recommendation, either to your immediate leadership or to some organizational board, make sure you keep that documentation, make sure you keep those conversations moving forward so that the changes take place so that they can positively impact your organization. So now that we've talked a little bit about board structures, I'd like to transition and talk a little bit about community outreach. When we think about community outreach, it can look very different depending on the type of organization you're in. And what we need to remember is, at the end of the day, our organizations serve a purpose, right? So we're a college. Obviously, our focus is attracting students, enrolling students, and helping them progress through their career of choice, right? But is that all? Is that everything it needs to be, right? Are we simply just exams and lectures? I will argue no. I will argue that we also want students who are very well connected to what's happening in our communities and give back to our communities. So in order to help me have this conversation, I've invited two community partners at our campus to join me. I've invited Ms. Tarnisha Clyde, who is President, Founder, CEO of the Minnesota Black Chamber of Commerce, and also Mr. David Wilkins, who is the President of ASALA, which is the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. And I won't steal their thunder to say what their organizations actually do, but I'll start with Tarnisha. If you would, could you just further introduce yourself and talk to us really quickly about what the Minnesota Chamber does?
Thank you, Corey. The Minnesota Black Chamber of Commerce was founded in 2015, and it was to advance the entrepreneurship and the businesses in the African American communities. We saw the need that the African American was missing, so we decided to create an avenue for a business owner to evolve and elevate to the next level to expand the population of entrepreneurship. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Wilkins, could you please share a little bit about ASALA?
Thanks, Corey, and hello, everybody. So I am David Wilkins, the president of Minnesota ASALA, the Sarasota Bradenton branch of ASALA. And as Corey said, ASALA was founded in 1915 by Dr. Carter G. Woodson, the father of Black History Month. And it is our mission in all of the many branches across the country to promote, preserve, research, interpret, and disseminate information on Black life and history and culture across the world. And so our work here in Minnesota and Sarasota and Bradenton, is to do exactly that. We do that through interactions with organizations like USF, local college, high schools, and other schools, with students, with membership of about 400 individuals and institutions, and doing everything we can, again, to fulfill the mission that Dr. Woodson left us many, many years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkins. It was important for me as a diversity officer to have organizations represented in this certificate that are not the larger organizations that we typically see, that do not have, you know, what seems to be endless resources. It was important to me to bring organizations to the stage that do need the support and partnerships of organizations that are seated in their backyard. So with that as a launch point, I was hoping that each of you could kind of share your perspective as an organization that's in the community, that sees larger organizations such as University of South Florida, what that importance of community outreach is, and how we could establish better partnerships with one another.
Thank you, Corey. For the Minnesota Black Chamber of Commerce, the community benefits place. These efforts allow for us to reach our strategic goals and to just better structure and implement those goals. At the same time, it benefits and it targets the demographics that we serve. And that demographics would ordinarily not benefit from that. And we kind of call it the greater good or the village concept. And when this all takes place, when you have a collaboration between partners, it actually allows for the community at large to win. And that's the common denominator. The community all wins.
Thank you.
Corey, I think we've seen it in our relationships with what we call institutional partners, USF being one. My predecessor, Jim Stewart, recognized that while we've got this large number of mostly retired folks who've come to Florida who are interested in Black life, history, and culture, we also have partners who have their own, obviously, missions, and that working together, we can better fulfill our mission and vision and engage in ongoing building relationships with now 15 or 16 institutional partners that cover the universities, the arts, culture, and it helps us succeed in our mission.
Absolutely. You know, I know our time is short, but just one last quick question to the both of you. What advice would you have for persons who are in communities, who are in smaller organizations and want to partner with larger sports teams or larger universities, and those connections haven't been made? So what advice would you give to help an organization kind of reach out on their own and try to make those connections?
I think in some of the other presentations, it was spot on. Allow for that dialogue to take place. You even mentioned it. Show up at the public meetings. Have the networking events. It's a great place to meet public partners, and just allowing the conversation and the dialogue to just happen, being in the circle of those individuals, getting to know those individuals, and just allow that organic, vibrant collaboration to take place, I think is a win-win for anyone. But not being afraid or intimidated to go to a large university to seek out partnership, because it is in their strategic plan to do business and to create those relationships. So I think that's really important for us as a small organization to do.
Absolutely. Mr. Wilkins?
Corey, I think what we discovered is among our membership, we have many retired professionals, people who've operated around the world in many different capacities, who have connections here in the community, even if it's short-lived. And it's simply encouraging our individual members to reach out to the connections they already have and invite them to join us as we do at our monthly meetings. And they've been more than excited to invite us to join them. So it is an engagement built on really existing relationships and just building on those and moving forward together to achieve our mutual objectives.
Absolutely. Well, I would like to thank both of you for joining us this evening. Best of luck to you. I know the University of South Florida is very happy and fortunate to have your participation with us, and I wish you nothing but success in the future.
Thank you so much, Corey, for having us.
Thanks, Tornisha.
Thank you.
Okay, so once again, I know our time is short this evening, and I want to make sure we have an opportunity to get to a few questions today. I'd like to invite Jacqueline to come back on and join me to respond to some of the questions that might be lingering out there.
Thanks, Corey.
So the first question I see is, you mentioned value proposition of minority-owned business. Can you give examples of how to position myself as I am competing against larger companies? And Jacqueline, I'll kick that to you.
Okay. This is a great question. I know sometimes that, engaging a new client or sometimes even an existing client, it can seem like the hurdle to get past some of your larger competitors is difficult to overcome. So I think what I would say is don't be afraid to highlight what sets you apart. And why what makes you unique is important to the company that you're targeting. But in order to do that, you have to know what's important to them. You have a unique value proposition, and maybe that's diversity of thought, maybe it's a niche product or the way you deliver your service, but make sure you showcase what's different. Companies are looking for uncommon solutions to the very unique situations that they're facing. Just focus your efforts, be very clear about what you bring to the table, and don't be afraid to say no to opportunities that aren't the right fit for your company, but use that as an opportunity to ensure that the company understands what you're better suited to do for them.
Perfect, thank you. Let's see, I work for a local affiliate of a nationwide nonprofit. How can we find the organizations like Helios, Amgen, or Bloomin' Brands that want to help at the local level? That's a very good question. You know, I would start first with within your organization, find who does this type of community work. I know at some nonprofits it's smaller, so the staffing is smaller, so they may not be someone to specifically work in community outreach or community engagement. But there are some organizations such as the Urban League that you heard on this certificate today that are present in a lot of communities. That's a good starting place. Once you establish that ground zero, it's just about networking and continuing to grow your contacts in that area. As a leader, how do I choose what organizations to reach out to in the community? Jacqueline, you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. Well, so if we're talking about, from a company standpoint, if you're looking to elevate your CSR or your supplier diversity program, if it's part of CSR or not, I think there are a lot of nonprofits that support supplier diversity that you can reach out to at the local, regional, national level. Even a lot of national partners have regional or local chapters that you can get engaged in. But I would say reach out to as many people or as many organizations as you can, have the conversation and find out how you can become actively engaged.
Where the issue starts. There should always be a budget for DEI in every organization, institution, corporation. Do you have any suggestions on how we can get budget allocations? Get your data, get your facts, make a compelling argument. Blanket asks for DEI resources tend to have little yield, little effect, right? So once again, be very targeted in your ask. We need DEI funding for what? To recruit more staff, to do programming, to provide staff development, right? And use existing data to compel your argument, right? So it's not coming from a place of, it's not personal, it's not coming from a place of emotion, but it's empirical, it's pragmatic. Speak to ways that will strengthen your company, how it will retain, workers within the company, and develop allies. So once you do the research and you do the data, it might be difficult to start at the top. So you might want to shop your idea around to other departments within your organization before making the larger push to share your ideas with leadership. And Jacqueline, did you have anything you wanted to share?
I think you hit it right on the head. I think the specificity of the ask is really important. Data and facts are important, and socializing it within the company, not just to the decision makers, but to others who might have other ideas on how to advance that mission. That's a really critical component.
Do I need to be certified to reach out to supplier diversity groups? Jacqueline.
Perfect. So you do not need to be certified to reach out to the not-for-profit supplier diversity organizations. They will help you get certified. You do not need to be certified to reach out to corporations, to their supplier diversity contact, or someone inside the organization. We can also help point you in the right direction to get certified. We have lots of resources, lots of contacts, and we will help you get there.
Are companies taking advantage of this being a moment, or are we going to see change continuously? I will say this: don't take your foot off the gas, right? So I can't respond to if the national movement will end or not. But if you have any kind of movement within your organization and you are in a position to drive that change, do not take your foot off the gas, right? And do so with the mission of your organization in mind, with a destination in mind as well, right? So as we think through building more diverse and inclusive communities within our organization and within the larger community it resides, the time is now. So the window is open to build those pathways so that even if the national movement subsides, you can feel that deeper impact right at home. Last question. Do non-diverse organizations need to improve the diversity of their board and executive team before embarking on a public-facing CSR? Jacqueline, I'll allow you to take a stab at that first.
So the first thing that stands out to me is a public-facing CSR. I don't feel like there's ever a bad time to embark on a corporate social responsibility journey. And I think along that journey, for non-diverse organizations, they're going to discover why diversity is so valuable. And I think there's lessons to be learned along the way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And once again, as we've already mentioned in this module, we have to start where we are, So in efforts to diversify the board, we may have to start with our ERGs. We may have to start with other partnerships we've established within the company until we arrive at that goal. That said, I'd like to thank everyone for participating. Thank you for your questions. Don't forget to take the quiz take all the quizzes by May 19th.